Empire Architects. This is the story of George Lucas. A student filmmaker from Modesto turned a space opera no studio wanted into one of the most valuable entertainment engines on Earth. The defining move was not a camera trick or a lucky casting. It was a contract decision. Trade salary for sequel and merchandising control. Build technology to own the bottlenecks. Then license distribution while keeping the rights that compound. That choice built Lucasfilm and rewired modern media. George Walton Lucas Jr. was born in 1944 in Modesto, California. According to Encyclopaedia Britannica, he loved cars and racing as a teenager and planned on becoming a professional driver. Days before high school graduation, he survived a serious car accident. The crash turned his attention toward cameras and editing rooms. He enrolled at Modesto Junior College, then transferred to the University of Southern California's School of Cinematic Arts. Student films at USC focused on motion, electronics, and rhythm. He studied editing like a musician studies time. He met mentors and peers who would later shape New Hollywood. A relationship with Francis Ford Coppola pulled him into a new orbit. Lucas worked as a production assistant on Coppola's Finian's Rainbow. Together they formed an early partnership called American Zoetrope to make personal films with new technology. Lucas expanded a student short into his first feature. Thanks 1138 was a sterile dystopia that showed a fierce eye and a cool tone. It struggled at the box office but earned attention for sound design and imagery. The next project changed the trajectory. American Graffiti captured teenage nights and car culture in 1962 with a tapestry of characters and a wall-to-wall radio soundtrack. Universal released it in 1973. The film became a surprise hit and earned multiple Academy Award nominations. The result was money and momentum. The momentum could have gone toward directing assignments inside studios. He chose a different path. He formed Lucasfilm Limited. He started writing a space fantasy inspired by old serials and mythic structure. Studios passed. Science fiction was not a bankable genre. The script evolved through drafts. Spaceships and dogfights demanded effects Hollywood no longer knew how to build. The project needed money. It needed a distributor. It needed a contract that protected the upside that no one else believed in. Here is the cliff. He walked into a studio with a pitch that sounded risky and a contract asked that sounded naive. He wanted to take less now to own more later. The defining move went onto paper in 1976 when 20th Century Fox agreed to finance and distribute Star Wars. According to industry histories and trade reporting, Lucas negotiated to retain sequel rights and the licensing and merchandising rights in exchange for a lower director's fee and tight production budgets. Variety and other reputable outlets have detailed this bargain. The studio kept distribution and owned the first film. Lucas could make and control sequels. He could license toys, games, and tie-in products through Lucasfilm. The clause looked like a footnote. It became the axis of a new empire. There was another decision inside the same moment. The effects studio he needed did not exist. So he built one. Industrial Light and Magic began in a warehouse in Van Nuys with a group of young artists and engineers coaxing motion control cameras and model work into shots that felt new. The team invented solutions fast enough to cut scenes that had only lived in the storyboard. Sound needed its own home. His team built a library of original effects. They treated sound design as a character, not a decoration. The production improvised toward a level of spectacle no one expected from a rough science fiction gamble. What happened next surprised everyone. Star Wars opened in May 1977 and became a phenomenon. Lines wrapped city blocks. The film set box office records and built a new global audience across languages and ages. According to Encyclopaedia Britannica, it changed summer release logic and established the modern blockbuster rhythm. Toys and T-shirts sold out. Kenner, the licensee for action figures, scrambled to meet demand and issued an early bird certificate because it could not manufacture fast enough. The licensing and merchandising rights in the Lucasfilm contract sprang to life. Money began to flow into the company that owned the rights rather than only into the studio that owned the film. Here is what most people miss: the contract was only half the move. The other half was a vertical stack of tools that made the next film possible without asking permission. Industrial light and magic grew into a permanent facility. Skywalker sound emerged to elevate audio beyond any competitor. Post-production and editorial learned to integrate new technologies as they arrived. The company did not simply own characters. It owned the means to produce their worlds. The pattern repeated. Lucas co-created Indiana Jones with Steven Spielberg. The structure kept control close. Lucasfilm developed and produced. Studios distributed. The company nurtured ILM and Skywalker sound not as cost centers but as flywheels. ILM served Star Wars and then served other directors. Skywalker sound mixed Lucasfilm projects and then mixed for Hollywood as a whole. Cash generation and learning cycles fed each other. Pressure built as the second chapter of the story demanded a larger bet. The Empire Strikes Back required more complexity, more locations, and a new director in Irvin Kershner. Lucas wanted to preserve independence. He decided to finance the film himself rather than rely on traditional studio checks. As reported across reputable biographies and trade histories, he secured bank loans using Star Wars revenues and licensing as collateral. That decision kept sequel and merchandising control intact. It also put company survival on the line. Production ran over schedule and budget. Effects shots multiplied. Cash needs grew. Lucas scrambled to keep the pipeline full and the lenders confident. The choice to self-finance became a high-wire act that only works when the next shot delivers and the final cut satisfies a hungry audience. The stakes were clear. If the film disappointed, independence would evaporate. What happened next surprised everyone again. The Empire Strikes Back opened in 1980 to huge crowds and critical acclaim that deepened over time. It grossed hundreds of millions and validated the model. Return of the Jedi followed in 1983 with another wave of success. The original trilogy had proven that a creator could license distribution while keeping control of the rights that compound. Toys, comics, novels, soundtracks, and home video sales created a long tail that outlived any one theatrical run. According to Encyclopaedia Britannica, Star Wars became a global franchise that influenced technology as much as storytelling. The technology story added new branches. The graphics team inside Lucasfilm's computer division developed software and hardware for image creation. The team included researchers who would later transform animation. In 1986, Lucas sold the computer graphics group to Steve Jobs. As reported by the New York Times that year, Jobs paid about $5 million to acquire the group and committed an additional $5 million in capital. The group became Pixar. This sale reflected business realities at Lucasfilm amid personal and financial pressures, including a divorce and a focus on live-action projects. It also planted a seed that would later bloom across the industry. The audio side became a business too. Thanks was established to set performance standards for theaters and playback systems so audiences could hear films as intended. The name became a mark that consumers and exhibitors trusted. Skywalker Ranch became a home for sound and picture finishing. These were not vanity projects. They were parts of a single operating logic. When a link in the chain threatened quality or independence, Lucas built a tool rather than hope. But that is not the full picture. The company did not only build for itself. ILM took on work for other studios and directors. It built the effects for films that defined their eras across genres. The company employed hundreds of artists and engineers. It won dozens of Academy Awards for visual effects and sound. According to ILM and Academy records, the shop built a lineage of innovations that became standard practice. The technology arm became a profit center and a moat. The next leap was daring in a different way. Lucas announced a new Star Wars trilogy in the late 1990s. The story would precede the original films. The films would be financed independently through Lucasfilm. Distribution deals would be struck with major studios for release. The tools would be updated to a digital age. The approach stayed consistent. Own the rights. Write the checks. License the parts of the pipeline that do not subtract control. The Phantom Menace opened in 1999 to record ticket sales and intense discussion. Attack of the Clones in 2002 and Revenge of the Sith in 2005 completed the second trilogy. Critical reception varied. Box office did not. According to multiple trade reports and box office tallies, the prequels grossed billions worldwide. The films advanced digital production, digital compositing, and digital projection. The company took creative risks and absorbed the reactions without needing to satisfy the short-term preferences of a studio's greenlight committee. Here is what most people miss. The prequels were not only new chapters. They were a technology lab disguised as a saga. Digital cameras replaced film on set for Star Wars 2. Digital intermediates matured inside ILM during post-production. The workflow that now defines modern filmmaking, from principal photography through digital finish, gained mainstream credibility in part because Lucas forced the pipeline to work at scale. The company again owned the bottleneck by turning it into a business. The money story kept pace. Licensing fed cash into the company at levels rarely seen for a single intellectual property. Home video formats multiplied re-release opportunities. Video games extended the universe. Books and animated series filled gaps in the timeline. Lucasfilm built and owned a catalog that rolled revenue through multiple product cycles. It also maintained quality control through internal teams and select partners. Long-tail cash flow allowed long-range planning. The philanthropic dimension entered with intent. According to Forbes and public statements, Lucas pledged to dedicate the majority of the proceeds from any sale of Lucasfilm to education through philanthropic vehicles, including the George Lucas Educational Foundation. His foundation and its Edutopia initiative have supported project-based learning and educational innovation. The wealth created by a contract clause about toys and sequels became classrooms and grants. The loop from studio bargaining to public goods became clear. The sale arrived in 2012. The Walt Disney Company announced it would acquire Lucasfilm in a cash and stock transaction valued at approximately $4.05 billion. The company press release set the terms and closed the debate. Public filings show that the purchase price was split between cash and Disney shares. Lucas became one of Disney's largest individual shareholders. The buyer gained Star Wars, Indiana Jones, ILM, and related assets. According to the Disney statement and subsequent financial reports, the deal delivered new films, television series, and theme park expansions that mined the catalog for new generations. But that is not the full picture. The sale was not an exit from the operating logic. It was a transfer of stewardship of the catalog. ILM and Skywalker Sound continued to operate and to serve the industry. Lucasfilm became a division inside a larger company with global distribution reach. The strategy that held for decades, own the compounding rights and own the tools, had produced a set of assets that could be monetized across parks, streaming, consumer products, and more. The numbers that verify the shape are straightforward. The Disney purchase price sat at about $4.05 billion. According to Forbes, Lucas has been listed among the wealthiest people in entertainment for years, with net worth measured in the billions and largely tied to ownership in Disney following the sale and to other assets. ILM and Skywalker Sound remain industry fixtures. The Star Wars franchise continues to produce films and series that generate subscription and merchandise revenues across platforms. The engine did not stop. It changed owners and kept turning. The origin story of the deal that fueled it all deserves a closer reading. Why did the studio agree to give away sequel and licensing rights in 1976? Because the project looked like a risk and the studio wanted to cap exposure. Because director fees were a cost they could lower. Because few executives believed that toys and T-shirts could rival ticket sales. Lucas used the opening to protect the right to do the next movie and to license the universe. He removed cash compensation that studios understood and asked for rights that studios did not. The asymmetry was born from a gap in belief. Here is what most people miss. Sequel rights are not only a promise of more films. They are a governance tool. They give the creator leverage over casting, story, and schedule. If the next episode must flow through your company, you can demand consistency where others would demand speed. The toy rights are not only cash. They are a research program. They show in real time which characters and ships resonate. They give market data that informs the next script meeting. The contract gave him 2 feedback loops that studios normally keep. He turned them into creative and business advantages. The technology stack amplified the effect. Industrial light and magic lowered the cost of spectacle for Lucasfilm and for clients. Skywalker Sound raised the floor for audio in ways that justified thanks standards and the consumer gear that carried the mark. The computer division that became Pixar wrote software and built hardware that pushed graphics forward for the industry as a whole. These investments were expensive. They paid for themselves by removing friction and creating saleable services. The profit pool widened from tickets to tools. The risk management logic behind self-financing deserves its own moment. Lucas borrowed against existing revenues and rights to fund Empire. He carried cash flow risk so he could keep creative and licensing control. He was not gambling on one title. He was defending the architecture. That architecture paid off over decades. The lesson is not that everyone should self-finance. It is that control of a compounding catalog can justify short-term balance sheet strain when the probabilities and the distribution partners are known. The failures inside the wins must be acknowledged. Not every film found critical love. Creative choices divided audiences. Business decisions like selling the computer graphics group at a low price eliminated direct exposure to one of the era's biggest growth stories. When loud backlash hit the prequels, the company absorbed it without changing course on ownership. The decision to step aside from day-to-day storytelling in the Disney era led to projects that diverged from the creator's vision. Empires do not grant permanent satisfaction. They grant optionality and endurance. He built both. For modern builders, the transferable code is concentrated in a few sentences. Own the character and the universe. Own the sequel path. Own the technology that the story depends on. License the parts of distribution that require scale. Take less cash up front in exchange for the rights that the market undervalues today. Then learn from the data your rights produce and adjust the next product accordingly. Examples beyond film make the point. A video game studio can fund and own its engine and its IP while licensing platform distribution. A beauty brand can own formulas and trademarks while licensing retail placement. A newsletter creator can own list and archive while using platforms only for discovery. The decision is the same. Trade salary for sequel and licensing control. Build tools next to story. Hold the core. Let partners multiply it. The timing of Disney's purchase provides a final lesson. He sold when the catalog was durable and culture had proven the long tail across formats. He took a mix of cash and stock in a buyer with multiple ways to extract value from characters and worlds. He announced a philanthropic intent to direct much of his fortune toward education. The operating logic extended beyond business into legacy. There is also a caution for anyone reading the story as an inevitability. Studios have learned from the 1970s. The bargain Lucas won is rare today. Sequel and merchandising rights are now central to studio models. The loophole closed. The pattern is still available if the creator builds outside of incumbent channels, proves demand at scale, and then chooses partners from a position of strength. The modern version is to control a universe on digital platforms before handing any keys to a studio or a streamer. What happened next after 2012 underscores endurance. New films, live-action series, and animated shows expanded the timeline. Theme parks built lands where ships and marketplaces became physical. Streaming platforms used the universe to drive subscriptions. The company that wrote the first contract unspooled returns for a new owner. The choice made in a negotiation room in 1976 is still paying. A final layer speaks to method. George Lucas organized his work around work. He rarely promoted himself in public. He promoted a process. Write carefully. Build the tool you need. Hire obsessives. Protect the cut. Teach through the work rather than through words. The structure he left behind reflects that posture. Lucasfilm, ILM, and Skywalker Sound look like factories. They produce on schedule. They integrate new gear. They sell quality to clients and fans. The core line can be stated simply. He saw that characters are equity and that manufacturing spectacle can be vertically integrated. He traded checks for a stake. He reinvested into tools that made the stake harder to copy. He licensed reach and kept the options that matter. It is a calm play. It is a powerful one. From a USC editing bay to a valley ranch, From a warehouse in Van Nuys to a studio inside Disney, the line is clean. A creator used a contract to pull tomorrow's cash into his company and used that cash to build machines that print imagination. Then he turned years of receipts into programs that fund classrooms. This is the Empire Code when it is written by a storyteller who counts. For the mechanics behind this pattern, the channel's Money video explains the quadratic strategy in detail. George Lucas built the modern template for a creator-owned universe by making one contrarian decision at the very beginning. Take less and own more. Then build the infrastructure that makes owning more valuable every year. George Lucas took a world no one believed in and kept the parts that grow. That is the lesson and the map. If you enjoyed learning about this empire builder's journey and you're interested in building your own empire, there's something you need to know. George Lucas and 78% of the Forbes 400 use a specific strategy to build massive businesses and multiply their wealth systematically. But here is what most people miss: there is a pattern. A strategy hiding in plain sight. The Forbes 400 know it. They exploit it. They have built fortunes with it. And it has been hidden from mainstream business education for decades. First link in the description reveals what the titans of industry do not talk about publicly. Watch it next. 10 minutes that could change everything.